a comprehensive critique of Ohio for Freedom's exposure of Rod Parsley's ministry. Introduction: the episode that uncovered hidden truths. In the recent episode of Ohio for Freedom, host Everett, along with guest Robin Torgrimson, embarked on an investigative journey that dismantled the well-polished but deceptive practices embedded in Rod Parsley's ministry. This was not a routine episode filled with superficial observations, but a rigorous critique that laid bare the unethical operations surrounding Parsley's prayer cloth campaign. The discussion unearthed a web of manipulation, commodification of faith, and questionable ethics that called into question the very essence of Parsley's spiritual and moral leadership. By exposing these practices, Everett and Robin made a resounding case for why believers must remain vigilant and why accountability in religious leadership is paramount. The episode set the stage for a comprehensive examination of the prayer cloth campaign, which had been marketed as a powerful channel for divine intervention and blessings. However, behind the scenes, as revealed through testimonies and first-hand accounts, it was nothing more than a well-orchestrated operation aimed at financial gain rather than genuine spiritual support. Robin's participation was invaluable in providing an insider perspective on how the ministry's practices not only exploited the faith of its congregation, but also tarnished the broader integrity of spiritual leadership. Chapter 1. Dissecting the prayer cloth campaign: illusions, manipulations, and the pursuit of profit. Rod Parsley's prayer cloth campaign stood at the center of the Ohio for Freedom episode, serving as a stark example of how faith-based initiatives can be distorted for profit. Marketed as divinely blessed items capable of producing miraculous results, these prayer cloths were promoted to followers as potent spiritual tools. Believers were told that by donating to the ministry, they would receive prayer cloths imbued with an anointing that could change their lives, bring healing, and even deliver them from dire circumstances. However, the investigation conducted by Everett and Robin revealed the painful truth that these promises were built on a foundation of deceit. Robin, drawing from her direct experiences within the ministry, exposed the reality that the prayer cloths were mass-produced in China. This disclosure directly contradicted the ministry's portrayal of the cloths as sacred items personally blessed by Parsley. The very origin of these cloths undermined the claims of their spiritual significance, reducing them to nothing more than manufactured trinkets. Such revelations are not just disappointing, they signify a profound betrayal of trust, as followers who believed in the authenticity of these items were, in essence, funding an operation that had more in common with a marketing scheme than a faith-based mission. Adding another layer to the disillusionment were the practices surrounding the prayer requests that were shown during services. Robin shared that these so-called prayer requests were often not genuine. The ministry employed tactics that included displaying empty envelopes or stacks of blank paper as props to create the illusion of widespread support and engagement. The objective was to convey a narrative of high demand and extensive participation, ultimately pressuring more believers to contribute. This practice of fabricating spiritual needs and responses illustrates a calculated effort to manipulate perceptions and drive financial contributions under false pretenses. The toll on staff and the reality of operations. The episode shed light on the demoralizing environment that these deceptive practices created for staff members. Employees who had a sincere commitment to their faith were disillusioned by the extent of the deceit they were required to perpetuate. Robin recounted how staff were tasked with maintaining the illusion of authenticity by setting up fake prayer requests, often at the expense of their own spiritual and ethical beliefs. This task, which required long hours and significant effort, underscored how the ministry prioritized its financial interests over the well-being and faith of its workforce. The commercial nature of the prayer cloth campaign was likened to secular fundraising tactics. Robin and Everett discussed how the emotional appeals used to solicit donations bore a striking resemblance to strategies employed by marketing professionals who focus on maximizing profit. By using urgency, promises of immediate results, and incentives for larger donations, Parsley's ministry was engaging in a practice that reduced spirituality to a commodity. The truth that the cloths were sourced from China only cemented the reality that this was a money-making venture cloaked in religious language and imagery. The betrayal of faith. The implications of such revelations are vast. At its core, religious faith is built on trust, honesty, and a genuine pursuit of spiritual connection. When a ministry exploits these foundations for financial gain, it risks not only its credibility, but the faith of its followers. The episode's exploration of the prayer cloth campaign highlighted how easily religious authority can be leveraged to extract financial benefits from a trusting congregation. This betrayal of faith is not just a moral failure on the part of the leadership, but a direct assault on the integrity of spiritual practice. Chapter 2. The controversy of Jonathan Miller's prayer cloth testimony. One of the most contentious topics covered in the episode was the testimony given by Jonathan Miller about his father, Donald K. Miller, and the role a prayer cloth allegedly played in his early release from prison. Jonathan's story was positioned as an inspirational narrative of redemption and divine intervention. He recounted how a prayer cloth given to him contributed to his father's release, framing it as a miraculous outcome that underscored the power of faith and the anointing associated with the prayer cloths distributed by Rod Parsley's ministry. However, Everett and Robin dissected this story with a critical eye, exposing a series of troubling contradictions and ethical red flags. Donald K. Miller was convicted of multiple counts of rape and sexual battery, serious crimes that inflicted significant trauma on his victims. Presenting his early release as a miracle facilitated by a prayer cloth not only trivialized the gravity of his offenses, but also distorted the narrative to fit a faith-based agenda. The episode underscored that while forgiveness and redemption are important spiritual concepts, they should never be wielded to overshadow justice and accountability. The reframing of serious crimes. Robin was particularly emphatic about the danger of using religious narratives to recast serious offenses as mere personal failings, or worse, to suggest that divine intervention could absolve them without addressing the impact on the victims. By positioning the prayer cloth as a key factor in Miller's release, Jonathan's testimony ran the risk of glorifying an event that should instead be met with sober reflection and acknowledgement of the harm done. This manipulation of faith, Everett argued, represents a broader pattern in which religious symbols and stories are used to shift focus away from accountability and towards a constructed image of miraculous redemption, a manufactured miracle. Everett and Robin also questioned whether the prayer cloth played any role at all in Miller's early release, or if more pragmatic factors were involved, such as legal advocacy, connections, or other behind-the-scenes interventions. The implication that a prayer cloth could influence such a significant legal outcome was not only misleading but dangerous, as it promoted a belief that spiritual relics could substitute for real-world consequences and justice. This skewed perception diminishes the experiences of victims and places them in the shadow of a narrative that prioritizes the exoneration of the offender over the trauma they endured. By dissecting this testimony, Everett and Robin revealed how religious narratives can be distorted to present events in a light that benefits the ministry at the expense of truth. This critique served as a powerful reminder that stories of faith should not be manipulated to obscure the full reality of serious situations or to position the ministry as a facilitator of miracles that align with its commercial interests. Chapter 3. The mystery surrounding Elder Thomas Bender's death. The episode took an even more somber turn as Everett and Robin explored the mystery surrounding the death of Elder Thomas Bender. Bender was a respected church elder known for his integrity and dedication to his faith. However, his relationship with the church was marked by periods of tension due to disagreements over the direction and practices of Parsley's ministry. Despite these conflicts, Bender remained a prominent figure, often returning to serve when called upon. Bender's tragic death occurred in a motorcycle accident shortly after delivering a sermon, an event that should have prompted a straightforward investigation and response. However, the legal and social reactions that followed raised significant questions. The driver responsible for the accident was reportedly under the influence, yet received a remarkably light sentence of just 20 days in jail for vehicular homicide. This outcome, as Everett and Robin highlighted, stood in stark contrast to the severity of the incident and suggested potential external influence. Questions of influence and accountability. Robin, who had known Bender's wife and was familiar with the internal workings of the church, recounted how Bender's passing was met with shock and disbelief. The leniency of the sentence given to the driver responsible for his death was not only perplexing, but indicative of a larger issue: the potential for the church's influence to extend beyond its congregation and into the judicial system. The episode posed difficult questions about whether the church intervened to protect its interests, mitigate negative publicity, or leverage its social connections to influence the outcome of the case. Everett pointed out that Bender's death, coupled with the incongruous legal response, mirrored the same themes of power and secrecy that were evident in the prayer cloth campaign. Both cases suggested a pattern where the church prioritized its reputation over transparency and justice. This approach, as Robin emphasized, undermines the values that religious institutions are meant to uphold, values that include truth, accountability, and compassion for all, including those who suffer due to wrongdoing. The ethical implications of secrecy. The secrecy surrounding Bender's death was not an isolated incident, but part of a broader pattern of opacity within the church's leadership. Everett and Robin underscored that this lack of transparency erodes trust and raises legitimate concerns about what other aspects of the ministry might be similarly concealed. The handling of Bender's case suggested that the church was willing to go to great lengths to protect its public image, even at the cost of ethical integrity. This behavior stands in direct contradiction to the principles of honesty and accountability that should be foundational in any faith-based organization. The discrepancy between the severity of the crime and the leniency of the sentence raised critical questions about justice and fairness within the community, leaving members and observers alike questioning whether certain individuals or groups were given preferential treatment. Robin's testimony brought to light how the atmosphere within the church often prioritized maintaining a positive public image over addressing uncomfortable truths. The church's response to Bender's death, characterized by minimal transparency and vague explanations, contributed to a culture of suspicion and doubt. This was emblematic of an organization that appeared to value control over openness, a stance that ultimately undermines the credibility of its leadership and erodes trust among its followers. The broader ramifications for faith communities. The episode's deep dive into these specific cases illuminated larger issues that extend beyond Parsley's ministry alone. When religious institutions use their influence to manipulate narratives, whether through marketing campaigns like the Prayer Cloth Initiative, or in how they handle tragic events such as Bender's death, they risk damaging the very foundation of trust and integrity upon which they are built. Faith communities look to their leaders not just for inspiration, but for an example of ethical and moral conduct. When these leaders fail to uphold these principles, the fallout can be profound, impacting not only the institution's reputation, but the spiritual well-being of its congregation. Everett and Robin called attention to the ripple effect that such practices can have. When deception and manipulation become embedded in the operations of a religious institution, they can distort the perception of faith for those who are genuinely seeking spiritual growth. Members who discover that their trust has been exploited may become disillusioned, leading to a crisis of faith that can extend well beyond the confines of a single church. This sense of betrayal can push individuals away from religious practice altogether, contributing to a broader skepticism about organized religion. Chapter 4. The intersection of faith and power, a dangerous dynamic. The episode also touched on the potentially dangerous intersection between faith and power. Everett and Robin's exploration of the events surrounding both the Prayer Cloth campaign and Elder Bender's death pointed to a deeper issue within religious institutions: the pursuit of influence and authority at the expense of ethical transparency. This dynamic is not unique to Parsley's ministry, but is a risk inherent to any organization that wields significant social and spiritual influence. The power wielded by religious leaders comes with immense responsibility. When that power is used to shape narratives, control public perception, and protect the organization at the cost of truth, it distorts the purpose of religious leadership. Faith is meant to uplift, guide, and provide moral clarity. When it is manipulated to serve the interests of a select few, it undermines the mission and leads to moral decay. Everett's questioning and Robin's forthright responses highlighted the need for checks and balances within religious leadership, emphasizing that no leader or institution should be above scrutiny. Calls for reform and accountability. The episode concluded with a strong call for reform and accountability. Everett and Robin's findings were not just a condemnation of Parsley's ministry, but an urgent reminder to all religious institutions that transparency, integrity, and a commitment to genuine spiritual practice must be non-negotiable. The failure to uphold these values invites not only skepticism and criticism, but also a decline in the moral authority that is essential for any faith-based organization. Robin's personal anecdotes and Everett's probing questions served as a powerful combination that urged listeners to demand more from their spiritual leaders. The notion that faith should not be commodified or used as a tool for personal or financial gain was reinforced throughout the discussion. The pair argued persuasively that true spiritual leadership is not demonstrated through elaborate marketing campaigns or by wielding influence to escape accountability, but through humility, honesty, and service to others. Conclusion: reclaiming the integrity of faith. The Ohio for Freedom episode was a clarion call for religious communities to reclaim the integrity of their faith practices. By exposing the manipulative tactics of the prayer cloth campaign, dissecting the controversial narrative around Jonathan Miller's testimony, and probing the mysterious circumstances surrounding Elder Thomas Bender's death, Everett and Robin underscored the importance of accountability, truth, and compassion. Their discussion highlighted how easily religious faith can be exploited when power goes unchecked, and how vital it is for congregations to remain vigilant. As the episode made clear, the stakes are high. When faith leaders and institutions betray the trust of their followers, they do more than damage their own reputations. They harm the spiritual fabric of their communities. Everett and Robin's courageous investigation served as both a warning and a call to action, urging believers to demand transparency and to prioritize genuine spiritual engagement over spectacle and profit. Their work reminds us that faith, at its most authentic, is not about grand promises or material incentives,